the point that I'm going to try and make is that if we did stop pollution today, it's not going to do anything in terms of stopping climate change. Climate change is going to happen with or without humans. It's just inevitable. We're going to have eventually another ice age. It just is what it is. We can argue that we might be able to slow down the progression, right? If we make drastic changes. However, I'm going to show you why I don't think that's such a viable option at this point. We'll get into that in a second. And I also think, and also bear in mind that all of the carbon emissions that we have already released, a lot of that is stuck and stays in the atmosphere, right? And I'm going to bring up this graph here. So let me find it.
So while you do that, just quickly, if you look at the cycles of climate change throughout history, and there's some cool things you can do to see this, but you can see that we have had ice ages. We have these heating and cooling periods. And that has led to changes in the ecosystems and the organisms that populate the planet. Now, if we get sufficiently advanced with our technologies, there isn't a reason why we as humans can't control that as well, or have more control over that, or more effect with that. Okay. And I think that as a species, that's what we should be trying to do, is to develop those technologies so that we have those degrees of freedom. So we're not at the whim of the environment, so to speak. Now, a lot of people might say, well, who are you to think that we can control the weather and all the rest? Well, currently we aren't, and we can't really, there are mechanisms to, but we still don't know enough. We have to continuously keep developing our technology and our understanding and our knowledge so that we can get to the stage where we can start to do these things and have less and less of those unintended consequences, or at least have the sufficient technology and resources to be able to deal with the unintended consequences that might come from those actions.
Here we have a graph of cumulative carbon dioxide emissions from 1850 to 2021. So it's not, we don't have, we don't have data from the last 2 years, but this is good enough for the point I'm trying to make here. So you can see USA, right? The gray part, fossil fuels, okay? And the green part?
And cement.
And cement, yeah. So
yeah, cement's big time.
Yeah, right? And also the green is land use and forestry. So if you add it all up, United States has produced twice as much carbon emissions, almost twice as much as any other country has in the world, right? And this is a global phenomenon. It's not just like, oh, one country is going to reduce their carbon footprint and it's going to make a difference. No, it's not exactly the case, because we have to consider something. Look who is number 2, China, right?
Yeah.
China is currently in a stage where they're growing very rapidly. They want to be a dominant economic power in the future. They're gaining a lot of traction. So who are we to dictate how they get there when United States has gone through all these changes, building all these industries and whatnot, creating all these emissions? We can't really dictate how China is going to get there too. So you can expect that it's likely that China will have a higher cumulative carbon emissions, higher than they currently do in the near future as well. We could probably expect the same from Russia, Brazil, Indonesia. Germany is an interesting one. Germany it's a lot lower than it should be. And I think that's because they sort of, they have their energy plants in other countries, I believe. And it doesn't.
Yeah, some.
Yeah, so it doesn't really count to their total per se. And another one we have to think about is India. Look where India is on the list, right? There's also another country with billions of people, and like China, they as well want to have their I don't know if revolution is the right word, but they for sure want to be another large economic power. So we can expect that their cumulative carbon emissions will also increase, right? The whole world is going through changes. at different rates. And the United States has already gotten, past the goal line at this point. But there are many countries that are trying to get to where the United States was. And in that process, it's likely we're going to see that they will produce and have a much larger impact on the globe. I guess we could argue if they decide that they will use other methods of producing energy and they will attempt to have a lower carbon footprint. But the point is that we will likely see this increase in the near future.
I can't help but like I'm into the AI stuff, and I can't help but like draw parallels between the two things. So Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI, right? The people responsible for ChatGPT. And he was recently in India. This is funny too. And he was asked from the crowd if he thinks that, like a gentleman from the crowd asked if he thinks that anyone or that people in India or teams in India could, build a new foundation model that would challenge their GPT models, right? And Sam Altman's like, no, they can't. They're not going to be able to. It's going to be too expensive. It's too hard. It's too this. It's too that. And it's the same as with this climate change stuff with the US being the biggest, CO2 producer essentially, and then trying to tell everybody else, they're like, hey, you need to stop that. You need to stop doing this. You need to stop. Like we did it and we realized it was bad. So now all you guys aren't allowed to do that. And it's a similar thing to them. Like Sam Altman's like, we built this big, we spent millions, if not billions of dollars on compute, right? We did all this training and all this compute. And now that we've done it, we've realized it's not very economic, it's not good for the environment and all this sort of stuff. So you guys shouldn't do it. Leave us be in control now. We've got our model. We're good. But it's the typical thing with the power structure. Like once you get in power, the US was able, did all of this stuff to develop its ability to project power. And now that they've got the power, they're like, we're going to tell you guys what you can do. And so again, like you, I don't see this graph changing. I don't see it going down. I see India is coming online. Like there's, over 1 billion people there who are getting hungry and getting interconnected and seeing what's possible in the world. And they're going to want a piece of that. And so they're going to. So I don't think, like we said before, the answer isn't sort of reducing these things. The answer is dealing with strategies to reuse these things. Okay, so how can we sequester carbon from the atmosphere that we've put into it? How can we utilize it in valuable ways? How can we make it a cycle, right, of creation and destruction, like reutilization, right? Like that's, literally all recycling symbols of that cycle. How can we complete the cycle? At the moment, we've got an unbroken loop, right? We've got a broken loop. It isn't completing, right? And we're losing all of that into the atmosphere. And that's what people are saying is accelerating this climate change. So it's about reutilizing.
So here at the top, carbon
Fossil
dioxide
fuels.
sources since 1850, right? So fossil fuels, look at this, coal, 32%, huge. Oil, 24%, natural gas, 10%. Deforestation is as big as coal. I didn't know that. That's really interesting. And cement and other. At the bottom here, we have carbon dioxide destinations since 1850. So what is utilizing or what is consuming basically carbon dioxide, right? Where does it go? So atmospheric uptake, 42%. So the majority of carbon dioxide is just in the atmosphere. And that makes sense. That's why we have higher levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, right? 32% plant growth and soil, right? Because plants, they consume carbon dioxide. They release oxygen, which we breathe, but they actually consume carbon dioxide. That's fucking dope. And then the rest, 26%, is dissolved in the ocean.
The majority isn't going into the atmosphere. But there is a good percentage, like 42% is a decent percentage. It's not like a small amount. Yes, so growing plants, it sequesters carbon. It really does. Like that's how, what makes a tree is part of the carbon. It helps to create the ligands and the structures that make trees. So nature, or evolution, has figured out how to complete these cycles. Yeah. And then we've sort of come on the scene, and we've advanced rapidly in our abilities to do things. And we haven't fully nailed the how to reutilize things appropriately and create the environments that allow us to sustain or persist long term. Yeah. But we're on that. I think we are on that path. I think, yes, we've been sidetracked and diverted down, sort of less fruitful tracks or dead ends. But I think now we're sort of getting to the point where we realize. With that, I was shocked because I thought cement was a lot higher. Like, I know cement is a big part of it, but for it to only be 3%, that was, that's a bit of a shock to me.
So the last point that I want to make was sometimes we need to be careful with the type of information that we are being presented. And even if it's coming from a scientist, right? Scientists don't always get it right. And as we know, scientists have a tendency to sort of superimpose certain information or graphs to show information in a certain way, which is telling a completely different story and, not using all the data that's available. And I'm going to show you an example of that right now. Just let me bring up this chart.
I'm going to show you an example of how scientists use examples to mislead you.
Yeah, exactly.
Global climate change, vital signs of the planet.
So here we have atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, right? And you can see how the graph is superimposed, which means they zoom in on a very specific area, which is from 1960 to 2020, right? And again, they zoom in where it says, where's the ppm, which is parts per million. And if you look at this graph, you're like, holy fuck, we are headed for a huge disaster. It's a very inclined graph. And meanwhile, the graph isn't necessarily misrepresenting the data because it's superimposed in this area. It's misleading because it's making us believe that, oh my God, like this is absolutely terrible, which it is bad, but it's not essentially telling us the entire story, and it's not informing us of what is actually going on. And graphs like this are sort of used to make very biased points when, especially if the government wants to impose carbon taxes, for example. Oh, look how much carbon has gone up in the last 60 years. We're headed for a huge disaster. So there's that graph. And I have another graph.
Where's the zoomed out one?
You want to see the zoomed out one?
Is that what you got?
Yeah. Well, I have another one.
Good job.
Another one before the zoomed out one. This one's even funnier. And again, it's just a little bit misleading. Okay, this is from the last 10,000 years. So you would think, oh my God, that's a huge time frame. 10,000 years, amazing, right? And you can see it's pretty steady-ish, the carbon, until we get to the last few years, and then it goes up immensely, which is, oh my God, we're headed for a disaster. And the line is even red. Red is bad.
Yeah, that's 100%. I was going to say that with the other graph. The fact that there is, the red lines going up as well, it plays into the narrative.
Okay, so great. We know that carbon has gone up recently. Okay, nice. Let's zoom out now, and let's look at what's been happening over the last 800,000 years.
So while Polska is doing that, just quickly, it's whenever you zoom into something, you lose context. You can see at a more fine-grained level, but you lose the greater context. And so it's important that when you zoom in to also remember to zoom out. And you have to take the zoom in and the zoomed out view in totality, right? And and context really matters, okay? Oh, here we go. Good graph. On our x-axis, we've got 800,000 years of data. I wonder how they did this.
I think they take samples, right, from glaciers?
Yes, you're right. Absolutely. Okay, yeah. So we can see that the carbon dioxide parts per million on your y-axis is going from, just under 200 up to 250, then back down to under 200, up and down, and it's cycling. There's a clear sort of cycle happening Highest previous concentration was about 350,000 years ago. You can see that on the graph there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we essentially have this cycle, and that's what you realize about everything in the universe is there's cycles. These things happen, and so if you, I think what Polska's referring to here is like, oh, you can't see my. If you got a cursor, yeah, can you just the furthest right on the peak on the furthest right?
Yeah, this part.
Yeah. So the top peak of it, that up there is what was zoomed in on.
Exactly. It was zoomed
down.
in on this portion right here. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it looks terrible. But if you look with context, like, so we zoomed in and we looked at that, it looked bad. Then we zoomed out and we realized, oh, okay, it isn't as bad as we thought it was. This is part of a natural cycle, or this is part of a cycle that has happened previously when, you know, we weren't doing the things that we're currently doing. So how much of this is actually, how much of this are we responsible for versus how much of this is actually just part of the cycle that the planet has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years?
Although climate change is a naturally occurring phenomena, humans have probably had an impact on the progression of climate change. But like you said, we don't really understand how much of an impact, and I don't think we can necessarily say that we've had a significant impact. I might be wrong on that point. That's something that I didn't really get to. ChatGPT says that it's significant, but
take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm sort of led to believe that, yeah, we had a hand in it for sure. We had a hand in it, and possibly the next ice age will come many years earlier. However, this is the natural progression of the Earth. This is inevitable. It was going to happen regardless. So I don't want people to think that, oh, if I stop driving my car and using electricity, this is going to come to a halt. No. It's not coming to a halt. It's never going to come to a halt. This is going to happen. That's why it is vital that we start looking into innovation and new technologies, like Ruben was saying. How can we harness all this carbon? There is the solution. 42% of carbon is taken up by the atmosphere. So that is a shit ton of carbon that we can use, you know, for energy, for other things, to basically to give Earth back the power so it goes through its natural cycles. But again, that doesn't mean an ice age isn't going to happen. It's coming. It's inevitable. But we should still care about the Earth because, I mean, it's where we live, bro. Like, you don't leave fucking shit 100%. On your floor in your house, so don't do it out there.
Correct.
By the way, I'll just a little nugget. ChatGPT said that 56 million years ago, the ppm, or the parts per million of carbon emissions, was 3,000. So
that's really high.
Yeah, like 6 or 7 times higher than it currently is.